I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. I am George Harvey, and here is Tom Fennell.
I'm Tom Fennell.
There you go. And we're starting with a cartoon. What is that?
Well, the cartoon's over, but I'll bring it back.
Oh, okay. What does that say? Let's read it.
You want coal? We own the mines. You want oil and gas? We own the wells. You want nuclear energy? We own the uranium. You want solar power? We only, solar power isn't feasible.
Now you know why.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
That says it all, doesn't it?
It sure does. That cartoon, it's kind of hard to trace where that came from, but it was forwarded by somebody in Greenpeace UK. Okay, so I have to apologize to everybody for leaving something out of an earlier show, which I was reminded of by the first item for this show. And the thing that I left out was importance, which is why I'm bringing it up and confessing instead of just letting it slide. Unilever, Shell, BT, which is the British telephone.
Oh, BT.
BT.
Oh.
And EDF, which is the French electric utility that controls all their French stuff, are among 70 leading companies today calling on governments across the globe, today being the 9th of April, to set up efforts to tackle climate change. Shell Oil is setting up efforts to tackle climate change. And
well, a month ago, I probably would have been surprised about that, but I've been reading, and these guys are starting to wake up.
They are. The companies say the world needs rapid and focused response to the threat of rising global carbon emissions, and that organization of 70 companies is done under the umbrella of the Prince of Wales. It's the Prince of Wales Business Leadership Group. Now, the reason this came to mind was...
The Prince of Wales is wanting Prince Charlie, or...?
Well, that's what some people call him. Prince Charles, yes. He is Prince Charles. And
the Prince of Wales, I lost my tail. Have you seen him, number 2, sir? No, sir, nicer. Old drinking game.
Interesting character.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he has been into renewable power for years and years and years, and organic food and things like that. And so he's got this thing called Duchy, I don't remember. They make cookies and things. And but he also, as one of his titles is Duke of Cornwall. And the Duchy of Cornwall is not the county of Cornwall in the southwest. It includes much of the county of Cornwall, but it also includes a lot of Devonshire and a lot of Somerset and other parts of England. And because he's the Duke, and he is the landlord of all the tenant farmers in that area.
Okay.
So he has told them, I want you to raise all your crops organically. And the result of this is that the tenant farmers in the Duchy of Cornwall are hitting a period of prosperity like they've never had before because their products are in demand all over Europe.
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, second order consequence or something like that.
And he's been after the London hotels to operate and restaurants to operate organically and so forth. Anyway, this was the item. Tackling climate change is the only way to grow the economy in the 21st century, according to Unilever CEO Paul Polman. He says businesses are starting to understand risks, but the governments are failing to respond. So, a small county in Northern California, that, by the way, that item came from rtcc.org. This is from RT. I'm sorry, correct myself. This is from the Christian Science Monitor. A small county in Northern California has become the first county government in the state to become grid energy positive. Yolo County, population 200,000, just west of Sacramento County, now produces 150% more energy from solar panels than it uses. I wish people wouldn't say 150% more. I can't tell whether that means 52% more, they say,
Yeah.
or whether it's really 152% more. But the point is they're producing at least 50%, 52% more energy than they use, which means that they're grid positive.
Yeah, I got something. I don't have any pictures of it, but I got something about that.
Do you?
Yolo County, just what you just said, just west of Sacramento, and that produces 152% more energy. We don't know exactly what they mean there. Yeah.
Yeah.
From solar panels than it uses.
The thing that you got to look out for is when they say somebody says that it's 152% less than they used to.
This is this is a good takeaway from that. The system produced $162,000 the first year of operation, and is predicted to earn the county $10 million over the first 25 years.
Yeah.
Talk about a little bit of tax abatement.
Yeah, absolutely. We could use some of that in Brattleboro. Anyway, that was on the 18th. On the 19th, we have this. According to the latest Energy Infrastructure Update report from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission Office, FERC, 92.1% of all new electric generation capacity in the United States in January through March of 2014 came from renewable energy sources. That is from Tree Hugger.
And that's the market happening.
That's, yeah. Although we'll see more gas coming in during the summer. That's what happened last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I'm really interested in seeing what happens with 7 gigawatts of wind power coming online in Texas over the near future. That the next one is, according to a new analysis by SNL Financial, more than half of all energy generation infrastructure planned for the next 5 years is renewable.
Mm-hmm.
And we're at the tipping point now.
Mm-hmm.
With renewable power plants replacing retiring coal. And the thing that's interesting to me about that is that it is renewable replacing coal, not gas replacing coal. In a lot of places, and this does happen, the cheapest way to upgrade a coal plant, is not to
turn it to gas.
Is to turn it to gas. You can do carbon capture and sequestration, but I think that's really kind of a...
Well, they're looking at the quick return.
Yeah.
And it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Maybe not a big enough step, but it's a step.
Yeah, it is.
And we have to look at this stuff incrementally.
We do. It's a step if we don't release a lot of methane from fracked earth.
Well, that's something else again.
Yeah, it sure is.
And that's something that they're not really shouting from the rooftops.
Yeah, well, not the government and not the fossil fuel industries.
Yeah, I've got a picture of
What's that?
a gas.
I was astonished to hear that
I've got
one of the biggest gas fields, they were flaring 36% of all the gas they got.
Yeah, that's kind of standard. That's what they're doing. I can't find this one.
I didn't know that.
It.
I knew they flared gas. I didn't know why, and I didn't realize it was that much. When I saw that it was that much, I asked why and found out. In the meantime, same day, 4/19. Oh, that item, by the way, came from Smithsonian. On the 19th of April, Environmental News Service sent us this. Reports released by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission show dozens of reactors that reassessed their vulnerability to earthquakes in the wake of March 2011 meltdowns at Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant are at greater risk than they were originally licensed to withstand. What are they going to do about that?
Just lay that one on me again.
Okay. After Fukushima Daiichi, the United States went to the nuclear industry in the United States and said, we have to reassess your vulnerability to earthquakes. Now, there's a power of earthquake that they had been licensed to
right from the beginning.
Right from the beginning.
They said, this is a possibility, you got to prepare for it.
That's right.
Okay.
And they had projected that they were, the maximum earthquake that they would hit would be a certain level, and they were built to withstand that level, and their licensing was based on their being built to withstand that level.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Fukushima Daiichi comes along. The federal government goes to the nuclear industry and says, now we've got to check these plants and find out if your vulnerability assessment is actually correct. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, they don't know whether it's correct, but we're dealing with chance here, and so they look into it more closely, and they found that dozens of these plants were more vulnerable than the level that they were licensed to withstand. So, for example, if you pick a nuclear plant, what's the one in New York that's on the Hudson River? That's
Indian Point.
Indian Point. You pick Indian Point, and let's just say, for the sake of argument, Indian Point was designed to withstand a 6.8 earthquake. Yeah. And they do a reassessment, and the thing is licensed on the basis of a 6.8, but all of a sudden the reassessment says, no, you're vulnerable all the way up to 7.1 or whatever.
I mean, because of where you are, 6.8 is unreasonably low.
That's right. Okay. So now the nuclear plant has got to deal with the fact that they are operating at a greater risk than their license says that they should be allowed to operate at.
Probably nobody was really even aware of that.
No, and people discover new problems with what's going on under the earth all the time. And
sometimes even create them.
Yeah. Sometimes even create them.
Like with fracking.
Like with fracking. So anyway, I don't know what's going to come of this. I haven't heard anything about that, but there are dozens of nuclear power plants that are in danger of earthquakes, and they have to do something about that. And this happens at an interesting time, because it's at the very moment that Mark Cooper up at the Vermont Law School had said, well, there are about 35 nuclear plants that are really not making enough money to make it worthwhile to run them. And
which is an interesting development.
Yeah,
too.
And one of the big power companies, which one was it? I've got it in my mind. Exelon. Has said we may be closing down several nuclear power plants the next year because they aren't making money. And you throw a thing like this on top of a nuclear power plant that they're thinking about closing anyway, and I think that is kind of goodbye nuclear power plant.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. So we are going to be watching that, I'm sure, whether we like it or not. Personally, I like it. I'd like to see them shut down. I don't like the idea that they're more vulnerable to earthquakes, but okay, that was on the 19th. On the 20th, we have this. This is an interesting one. The Turkish government is interested in building a new city for 200,000 people, and they're going to heat and light that city with pistachio shells.
I read about that. Well, I heard there's an awful lot of coffee in Brazil, but I never heard there was an awful lot of pistachio shells in Turkey.
I don't know.
They must be all over the place.
I think they must be. But, it leaves us with a question. What were they doing with all those pistachio shells in the past? They're probably floating around on the floor of the Mediterranean Ocean.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Or sea, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they probably weren't doing anything useful with them.
Well, the bagasse from sugarcane, a lot of times that just got dumped into rivers, and people, the fish and so forth were getting killed.
They're into that now, though.
They're into
bagasse.
Yeah.
Wherever it's being generated,
yep.
People are looking at using it. If it's not being
absolutely,
used
absolutely, and I'm seeing that very commonly. That some plantations in Malaysia, for example, are using their waste from whatever agricultural systems they've got to power themselves, where they didn't have power before. Mm-hmm. It's a very big deal. It's an important issue.
It makes sense, and it makes more sense now than ever before.
Yep.
And people are looking at it.
Yep. Yep. So that was on the 20th. On the 21st, we got this, this is from The Guardian. The site of Britain's nuclear dump at Sellafield turns out to have been poorly chosen. Why? It is virtually certain to be eroded by rising sea levels and to contaminate the Cumbrian coast with large amounts of radioactive waste. And this is according to an internal document released by the Environment Agency in Britain.
I did have,
and
I did see that. I had a
this
picture
brings
of
us
that.
right back to one of the problems of nuclear power plants is that they're all built on bodies, or not all, but almost all of them.
They're on water.
Are on
Yep.
water. So if you look at them in the United States, there's 10, I think, nuclear plants that are on the Atlantic Ocean. And if the Atlantic Ocean has a problem, those 10 plants suffer. Oyster Creek, as I recall, in New Jersey, in Hurricane Sandy came within a couple of inches of being swamped, which would not have been pleasant.
Here is that
What have you got?
shoreline that you were just talking about.
Oh, that's the Cumbrian
That's
coast?
Sellafield. Yep.
Oh, that's Sellafield.
Pretty place.
Sellafield is the site of probably the worst nuclear contamination outside of Japan and Russia. The Sellafield site had several meltdowns and a nuclear fire, which is called the Windscale fire, which was put out because somebody decided to do something more brave than he might have otherwise done.
I'll read the last sentence
But
here.
there were, I understand there were 200 pounds of plutonium dumped into the sea at that site.
Wow. I'll read the last sentence because it's significant. The UK Environmental Agency document estimates that the 1 million cubic meters of radioactive waste disposed of over the last 55 years by the civil and military nuclear industry at the site, which is near Sellafield Nuclear Complex in West Cumbria, is going to start leaking onto the shoreline.
Well, isn't that something? What kind of foresight were these people acting on? I don't get it. Did they think that the stuff was going to stay there forever without any danger? I think it's...
I don't think they even thought.
Well...
I think if they thought about it, they buried it. They probably didn't think about it at all.
It appalls me that we are in the position where that kind of, but of course that's happened in the United States, at Hanford too.
Oh yeah, Hanford is in rough shape.
I don't think Hanford's in as bad shape itself.
My sister lives near Savannah River, and every once in a while she'll send me a clipping from the local newspaper about radioactive turtles being found. The damn snapping turtle is walking across the road and somebody captures it and they bring it back to a lab or something like that, and it's ticking away.
Oh my gosh.
It's radioactive.
I don't know what to say to that. Anyway, let's move on. Around 1 billion people, you go from bad to worse. Around 1 billion people live in risks of high sea level rise and coastal flooding. The United States East Coast has a rate of sea level rise 3 or 4 times faster than the global average, with cities, beaches, and wetlands exposed to flooding, according to new IPCC reports. We're back to the IPCC reports.
Yeah, I got some pictures of
Climate
this too.
Central. Yeah. And this here again, we're back to a point where global warming is making houses, and these houses, just look at the quality of that house on the left.
That's not a poor man's house.
That's not a poor man's house. That cost a lot of money.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that water lapping against his porch.
Yeah, and that house is probably completely uninsurable, which means it is almost impossible to sell, because you'd only be able to sell it to somebody who had cash, because nobody's going to
mortgage it.
And so, who would buy that for cash? Well, a person who had a small amount of cash who could make an offer that was big enough for the person who owned it to part with it for that.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Be likely one of the neighbors or something like that, somebody already living there.
Who knows? But I mean, clearly that's not a place you want to be at during a hurricane.
Well, my cousin did. He doesn't quite have a house like that, but he did exactly that. As his family grew, he bought the house next door. And in the last hurricane, that house was destroyed.
Oh, wow.
His house took damage, but it's still livable. But
Well,
the house next door has been removed.
My gosh. I knew a guy when I was very young who had a house on top of a cliff on the east shore of Lake Michigan. And you wouldn't think of Lake Michigan as being particularly susceptible to that kind of flooding. But they had a bad storm, and the waves from the storm washed against the base of the cliff, and the cliff collapsed. And so the house, which was, I think, 150 feet from the cliff, from the actual cliff, wound up being about 25 feet from the cliff. And so they had to build a new foundation, jack up the house, and move it back, which they did. But it was, you know, even and along rivers. I've read about places in the South where you can't get insurance at all, and if you're within a 500-year flood zone.
Yeah, that's happening.
So, you know, it's destroying property values. It's destroying the values of mortgages that the banks are holding. It's hardly a surprise the banks are upset. It's hardly a surprise the insurance companies are upset. So there you have it.
And that other picture on the right is not China.
It's not China.
That's Salt Lake City.
Yeah, well, there you go. The city has set, what does that say?
Set ambitious targets to cut emissions.
I suppose if you're going to look like that, you'd better set ambitious targets to cut emissions. You know, I was looking at an article this week on China, and I was reading that there are places in China where 7-year-olds are getting lung cancer because of the quality of the air.
Yeah.
This is how bad it is. It's that bad that children are getting the exact kind of lung cancer that you would get if you were smoking and you were older.
Again, they've avoided looking at these things.
Well,
now they're looking at
now they're
them,
looking
and
at
they're
them.
doing stuff about it. And
I wonder if they're, I don't know, I wonder about what's going on in China, because right now they're still building coal plants.
yes, they are. Quite a few of them, as a matter of fact.
I don't know.
Unfortunately, nobody really knows what's going on in China.
Well, do the Chinese?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. So this is not a secret that was prepared on purpose. It was just an accident that nobody knows what's going on in China. But, you know, if you've got that many people, it's hardly a surprise that nobody knows what's going on.
Well, they got cities that they've built in China that nobody lives in.
Yes? Yes, they do?
Yeah.
Why is that? I've read about places where nobody lives, but I didn't
I mean, they've anticipated the economy
Growth.
would grow and move, but it hasn't happened quickly enough. So they got large, nice, neat cities with maybe 10% of what they could handle actually living there.
My gosh. Well, there you go. Okay, on the 22nd of April, and I don't know how to say this. The first word is Helmeth. It looks like Helmeth, all caps. The second is EU, both caps.
That's Welsh.
No, it's not Welsh. I can tell you that.
You can tell me Welsh.
Yeah.
That's starting to ring a bell, though.
Yeah. Is a power-to-gas process that can be more than 85% efficient. First,
That's an acronym.
it's an acronym.
I've got that down here somewhere. Let me see
acronym
if
a
I can
language?
pull it up.
Is acronym a language?
Might as well be.
Might as well
I
be.
do have something on that.
Okay. Now, I've known that this could be done, and a lot of other people have known that this could be done for years and years and years. In fact, it could have been done, I think, since the Fischer-Tropsch catalysis was first invented, which I think was in the 1930s. The first part of it, which is the most important part, actually, no. This is something that could have been done from the Sabatier process, which was invented in 1913. So this process has been around for over 100 years. And the process is you start by the earlier technology that was known of of electrolyzing water and producing hydrogen.
Right.
You know, kids do that in their
High school, standard high school
yeah, absolutely.
chemistry.
And then what you do is you take the hydrogen, and Sabatier, Paul Sabatier got a Nobel Prize, I think in 1922, because he figured out that you could take hydrogen and carbon dioxide, which you can get from any, you know, gas.
Anything that's burning.
Anything
Yeah.
that's burning, gas-powered plant, and you can catalyze the
Yep.
two. And that produces methane, which you can use as natural gas in a natural gas plant. And this Helmuth EU is a gas-to-power process that uses exactly that, but they've tweaked it to the point where it's 85% efficient.
It's up there.
And that, I think, is really interesting.
Helmuth means integrated high-temperature electrolysis and methanation.
How do you like that?
And
Now
it
we all
says
know.
power is first, just as you just said, power is first used to decompose water into oxygen and hydrogen. There's your electrolysis.
Yeah.
Then the hydrogen reacts with carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide
Yeah.
to produce methane, a main constituent of natural gas.
Yes. And you can take that methane and you can do other things with it besides burn it for power.
It
You
says
can-
it can be used seamlessly in the existing natural gas infrastructure
Yes,
facilities.
absolutely. Just put it into the pipes. But you can also take that methane and you can put it through some other catalyzing systems and turn it into alkanes, which include propane and butane and octane, gasoline. And you can also take that methane and use it for making plastic.
Yep, absolutely.
So we can
Absolutely.
replace the fossil fuels that we're getting out of the ground
Completely with this stuff. Absolutely.
completely. Yeah.
The
And
picture
this is
that's up there
85%
shows
efficient.
the location of town where they're working on this.
Feldheim?
Yeah, I think so.
They're working on it in Feldheim? No.
Like
Feldheim was in the news, but for a different reason.
Well, maybe I got.
It would be cool if
They
it
had
was done in Feldheim.
no. That's a different story. That is, they got a
Feldheim-
mini grid.
They have their own mini grid. You know, they put up wind turbines. They went to the utility and they said, we want to get paid for this. This is years ago, and the utility said, forget it. We're not going to give you money for that. And so the people in Feldheim
So they put them up
said-
themselves.
They just said, well, they had the turbines already. They just said, okay, we'll disconnect, and they did. So the whole town is disconnected from the grid, which was easy because it was just a farming community of 150 people. Well, it isn't a farming community of 150 people anymore. Since they did that, it has grown to over 2,000. And the reason is because they got lots and lots of jobs. And they Isn't that funny? I love it. But
As a
Feldheim
result
is
of
very
these
cool.
changes, residents pay approximately 31% less for electricity, 10% less for heat. Better yet, the town uses only a small fraction of the generated power themselves and sells the rest back to the grid to the tune of nearly $7 million.
The grid
each
made
year.
up with them. The same thing happened at the Brattleboro retreat.
Yeah.
That was very cool. The Brattleboro retreat just said, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to pay the money that you charge. We're going to do it ourselves. I just think, and then CVPS came back and said, oh, we didn't think you were serious when you said you'd cut off from the grid. Okay, but we were talking about Helmuth. I don't know where Helmuth was, but that's okay, we don't need it. I think Feldheim was just a great place. What is that picture?
This is a picture you talked about this last week. I just put it up there.
Oh, yes.
As a
Isn't this
contrast to
lovely?
Helmuth.
I want everybody to look at this. All right, you ever hear of wind turbine syndrome? There's wind turbine syndrome. You got the wind turbine right there, and right next to it is the hospital.
Oh, I thought that was a jail or something.
No,
I
it's
thought they were going to punish the prisoners.
No,
that's a
the
hospital, huh?
And in order to get from the staff parking lot to the hospital, you got to walk past the wind turbine.
I had a whole series of pictures on this last week. We didn't get to see
Yes.
them, but it was the town was devastated by a tornado.
Yep, absolutely.
I mean, devastated.
The town was hit by a tornado that was 1.5 miles wide, and the town was only 1.25 miles wide. And the tornado knocked down, completely flattened 95% of the buildings in town. All of the other buildings were severely damaged, and many, or maybe all of them, I don't know, had to be taken down. But the town council, it isn't a town, it's a city. It's a city
A
of
very small city.
tiny city. It's chartered as a city. It's a county seat of Kiowa County, Kansas. And they had a population of 1,250. Their population is now I think about 800. There were a number of people who moved away rather than moving back because things were, just too confused. There were a few people who died, but very few. It was because they had a 20-minute warning, so everybody was in their shelters. But the first thing they did is they said all municipal-owned buildings have to be LEED Platinum certified. So they basically, and then they said we want to generate our own power, and they were able to put up a wind farm of 10 turbines that were total 12.5 megawatts, and that wind farm is 3 miles from the town.
So right outside of town.
Right outside of town. So the people in the town knew, because they saw these wind turbines going up, and they knew what their characteristics were, and this represented a huge advantage for them. It was a rebirth of the town. So their attitude toward wind turbines is these things are great. They're what's saving us. So they started putting in wind turbines all through the town.
And privately, they're now doing it privately.
Yeah, privately. Best Western has 3.
Yep.
The John Deere dealership has 2. The high school, it may be just the school system has one of its own. The hospital has the one that you just saw the picture of.
It's still up. It's hiding behind us right now.
It's hiding behind us. There it is, folks. There. There's the wind turbine. I'm not used to this. But anyway, they've got this wind turbine at the hospital. So, this gives the whole idea of wind turbine syndrome an entirely new character. But, one of the things that I've come across, because I've been investigating this and other problems, in quotes, with wind, and one of the things that I found about the wind turbine syndrome is that it's been investigated repeatedly by medical associations and the authorities in Australia. The Australian Medical Association did, and there was an organization in Western Australia. I don't remember whether that was a medical association or a medical school, but they've investigated this. And what they found, excuse me, what they found was that wind turbine syndrome doesn't happen from the wind turbines alone. You've got to have some other thing there in addition that causes people to feel stress relating to those wind turbines.
So it's the stress that's doing it.
It's the stress that's doing it.
It's not the wind turbines themselves.
And the 2 things that have been cited that cause the stress is the construction of a wind farm without consulting the people of the town or giving them any benefit from it. That makes the fact that they're hosting this give them any benefit over everybody else.
So they're not bought into it.
They're not bought into it. And the other thing is the presence of anti-wind activists. You've got to have one of those 2 where there is no additional statistically analyzable change in what symptoms people have in the area.
This sort of makes sense.
It does. I'm sure that there's people out there right now who feel like throwing a shoe at me, but I'm just telling you what they said. And I happen to buy that. I happen to think that that's probably true. And the, my hair looks like a fright, doesn't it? Oh, well. Okay, should we go on or continue talking?
I wanted to see what my hair looks like.
This is better, folks, than checking your reflection out in a shop window. Okay. Something rare. Oh, the thing about Helmuth EU, I think that was the last thing we read, was from Nanowerk or Nanowerk. I don't know where that is. So.
I didn't keep the...
This from Clean Technica, something rare and extraordinarily positive occurred on American television. And we could have reported this last week too, except that I wasn't paying close enough attention to television. Fortunately, through YouTube and 350.org, the rest of the world can see it too. A new cable TV series called Years of Living Dangerously is about climate change in the 21st century.
I haven't seen it yet.
I've
got a link to it. I keep saying I want to see it.
I want to see it. That it has Harrison Ford and I've forgotten who all else. The cast of characters on this thing is really.
I know how you can get to it.
Ah, okay, good.
Go onto the Post Oil Solutions website.
Okay.
And there's a link to it.
Good. I should put a link to that at the Green Energy Times website.
Well, this is actually a series, as I
Yes, it is.
understand it. You can't see the whole series, but you can see the first episode of it, which I think is more than an hour.
Yeah, I think the second episode might be out. I don't know, but
from what I have read and been told, it's worth seeing.
Yeah. Okie doke. On the 23rd, which was yesterday, by using computers to analyze data continuously from wind turbines, wind power forecasts of unprecedented accuracy are making it possible for Colorado to use far more renewable energy at lower cost than the utilities ever thought possible. We're getting back to the thing of the wind turbines can be made more efficient, not by changing their physical design, but by changing the software.
Well, yeah, they can fine-tune the position of the blades to the nature of what wind is happening right now. Mm-hmm. I think it's probably the same article you're referring to, and they're getting almost constant feedback.
Yes.
From these turbines.
Yes.
And there's a couple of hundred of them.
Yes.
And then these numbers are getting crunched. And I don't think anybody has to do anything. I think it goes right back to these guys who say, okay, turn 3 degrees to the right, or are you over there? Turn a little bit to the left. And it
makes a difference.
They're seeing significant differences by what are they doing? They're not peaking them. Tweaking them. That's the word I'm looking for. They're tweaking these things.
Yeah, I read months ago that GE had come up with software for its turbines. We talked about that.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
Which would make them 5 to 10% more efficient. That's a big deal when you're talking about 100 megawatts.
Absolutely.
And another thing that I heard too, by the way, is that certain turbines under certain circumstances will produce far more noise than they would normally. And
so they can be tweaked to minimize the noise.
And it's just a matter, in the case of the noise, it reduces efficiency, but it eliminates the excess noise.
So they'll be making a value judgment then. What is it we want at this point?
Well, you know, excess noise is not that difficult to deal with because you can, if you have to, you can furl the wind turbine and shut it down altogether. But the real thing there is, if you're in a situation where the wind is going to cause a lot of noise, you can change the setup of the blades so that they turn less efficiently but much less noisily. And you can do this by measuring the sound on a continuous basis and have it put under a control of a computer. And the noise, as you know, is easy to measure. You know, it's just and
I
it's
have
regulated.
An app on my cell phone.
Yeah, and it's regulated so that you can say if it reaches to thus and such a level, it is not legal.
You just mentioned the years of living dangerously. I got something up there.
Okay.
From an article about it.
About
the picture on the left is a graph, and this is kind of scary.
Yes, this is actually.
It's 97% of the climate scientists say it's happening, but in America, only 41% of the American people believe it.
Yes.
And
that's right.
The opposite of 41%, what's that?
59%.
59% say no, that it's not happening, or we don't know.
Now, I want to point out that 97% is an old figure. It goes back about 3 years to a point where the official position of the UN was that they were 95% sure that it was happening. And now the UN is 100% sure that anthropogenic.
UN is now 100%. That's the report just came out.
Yeah, the IPCC is saying, I'm sorry, there is absolutely no doubt. This has to be happening this way. 2 and 2 does make 4. It cannot be on any other explanation. And so what's happening here is that we're looking at a figure which they say 97%. I saw a study that was done of peer-reviewed publications that dealt with climate change. I think it was last year. Might have been 2012, but I think it was 2013. And what they found was that out of 9,000 plus authors of 2,500 or so publications, because they team up on these things, there was only one who was willing to go so far as to say anthropogenic climate change is not happening. And
How much did they pay him?
well, what he said was, in the preface to the paper, he said, we can't allow it to happen because if it does, it's going to be terrible for the economy of Russia. So, how much did they pay him? Yeah, good question.
The picture on the right, well, it's still up there, is interesting. It's Apple. Apple in North Carolina
Yep,
has installed this 20 megawatt solar farm
yep,
to just power their facility there.
yep. Apple is really going all out, and in fact, they started in Vermont and presumably elsewhere. They have started recycling.
They're recycling all their stuff, yeah.
They will accept things back for free.
Which is
so
great
if you have
because
an Apple computer,
you can't take it to a landfill.
well, yeah, you pay. I don't know how much you pay to get rid of a
Yeah,
laptop
so
or
they're
computer, but
that's
you
an
do
incentive
pay.
to buy an Apple.
Well, yes, it is.
It is.
Yeah,
Gotta
although
call
Apple computers are expensive.
They are.
Yeah.
That's why I don't have one. But
Yep. Okay. Let's see. Where were we? The UK. This from Solar Power Portal. The UK is set to become the largest market for PVs in Europe during 2014, confirming its status as the hottest market across the region. This is the first time the UK will have had the lead for installed PV in Europe, which is almost always taken by Germany.
yeah, I was just going to say, when we read them, it's usually Germany, and now the UK is starting to shove them aside, huh? Good for them.
There have been a bunch of things that have happened in the UK in the last few weeks, and one of them was this wind farm, the set of wind. Actually, it wasn't a wind farm or even a set of wind farms. The day before yesterday, the UK awarded approval to 8 different projects. 5 of them were offshore wind farms, and 3 of them were biomass use. The smallest of these was over 200 megawatts, and the largest was
The smallest was over 200.
smallest. The total was like 5 gigawatts. So and
These are big projects.
These are big projects, and they're going to be done within the next couple of years. So and you know, the UK has got a lot. When you're talking about offshore wind in the UK, you're talking about something that has a very high capacity factor. It's better than half the capacity factor of nuclear.
The wind blows a lot.
The wind blows a lot. And these biomass plants, the capacity factor of those things is similar to the capacity factor of natural gas. So what we're after here is a situation where they're putting up gigawatts of power in terms of high capacity. This is like building 3 new nuclear power plants, except it's going to be done without having to charge double for the power and so forth.
So it's coming online quickly.
Yeah, and that's in addition to the solar that we're talking about now. What they're talking about in the UK is they want solar power to be put just about everywhere it can be, without destroying the countryside. And that means they are really going in for solar on people's roofs. What is that picture? Can you put that up?
I guess I can.
I don't know what it is, but I want to see it go up on the screen. I want to see what it looks like. This is cool. Where is that?
It's in India.
It's in India. Okay.
It's a grass hut with a solar panel outside.
Yeah, right. That's right. And that was an article that we didn't talk about last week, but it was an interesting article about politicians moving people to vote for them by promising to put up solar-powered lights. Because 40% of the people in India have got no power.
Well, yeah, there's a few cities in town that are world-class cities, but most of India is really rural.
Rural, and it's got a huge population. So there you have it. I have no idea what that hut.
I don't think somebody lives in that hut.
Probably not. I'm wondering what it is.
I can't tell you. It looks like the stone building in the back is where there's a lot of activity going on.
Yeah.
What this hut is, I don't know.
It might be a place for the chickens to sit during the rain.
I'm trying to figure out even what's in there, and I can't really tell.
Yeah, it looked to me like there was some stuff made of stone. Anyway, we should continue on our merry way. That was from Solar Power Portal, the last thing I read, which is about the UK setting taking the lead for installation of solar. Today, this is what came up. Kenya's economy. Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
How many people know where Kenya is? How many people live there? What the economy is like or anything? I think most people in the United States might know where it is.
But it was one of the leading British colonies for a long, long time, so
Right.
it's probably more progressed than a lot of Africa.
I would think so.
Nairobi's in Kenya.
Yes.
I had a
Kenya's-
girlfriend from Kenya.
Huh?
I had a girlfriend from Kenya.
Did you?
Yeah.
Kenya's economy could be boosted by as much as $45 billion a year by 2030 with a switch to a green economy. And the people who figured this out was the UN Environmental Program and the government of Kenya. This is not, you know, some group of wild-haired fanatics. It was the government of Kenya. $45 billion a year in a place like Kenya is a lot of money.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's more money than $45 billion in the United States. There must be some way that money expands as it goes into the third world or something.
Well, generally speaking, you can buy more with it because labor's so much cheaper and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, that was from Clean Technica. Next, China will allow private investment in 80 projects spanning the energy, information, and infrastructure sectors as part of reforms to increase privatization. The 80 involves solar energy, hydropower, wind power, and oil and gas pipelines, previously state monopolies. Don't invest in an oil pipeline in China. That's my advice. Anyway, that was from the Business Spectator.
Wasn't any pictures in that article, so I didn't get any.
Ah, okay. Yeah. I have a beautiful picture of China on as the background picture on my computer. It shows those mountains that go up like that and down. Really weird shaped mountains.
There's some weird stuff in China.
There's some weird stuff in China, but it's very beautiful. And I had needed support on my computer at one point, and so I called the support hotline, and I of course connected with a woman in India, and she she asked. She took over my computer remotely, and she had my screen up in front of her, and she said, "Where is that?" And I said, "That's China." And she said, "That reminds me so much of the place that I came from." And it actually reminded me a bit of Brattleboro, because it was looking up a valley, which it didn't look anything like Brattleboro, but it was looking up a valley, and it reminded me very much of that. Very pretty. The next, according to analysis, and I forget who did the analysis, but it was somebody important, new wind and solar can provide power at up to 50% lower cost than new nuclear and carbon capture and storage. 50% than coal or nuclear. A reliable generation system of wind, solar, and natural gas as a backup is 20% cheaper than a system of new nuclear combined with gas. So why would you put in a nuclear power plant? That is from Energy Matters. And last but not least, the U.S. EPA's Green Power Partnership has released a new list of the top 100 organizations that use electricity from renewable sources, such as solar and wind. And at the top is Intel. Intel is getting 100% of its electricity load with renewable resources. The other companies that were there were Apple and Google and Microsoft and...
All IT companies, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
computer companies.
Greenpeace was very much down on Microsoft because even though it's close to 100% renewable, the way that it's doing it is by buying renewable energy certificates, Renewables changing the nature of power and manufacturing. It is bizarre what happens.
Well, they've discovered, and I got it highlighted there, a way to create solar cells that can store accumulated energy from sunlight.
Right.
So this is a whole new area.
Yeah.
And then, with no more than a burst of a few photons, they do this somehow by light, release that energy in a steady and continuous form. These new photocells are called photoswitches, and they're made from carbon nanotubes. And we'll get into exactly what they are in a couple of seconds. And these photoswitches can exist in two different configurations. They're like flip-flops. They're either configuration A, where they store, or configuration B, where they release.
Wow. So
One collects energy
kind of
from
like
the photons that hit it and stores it, and the other configuration releases it. Because it can be switched from one form to another, the cell is essentially a battery. And this solves many of the problems of storage that arise with a weather-dependent system such as solar. Well, what are these nanotubes? Well, the nanotubes are made of graphene. And graphene is a form of pure carbon in a very thin, nearly transparent sheet, basically 1 atom thick. That's pretty thin.
It's pretty thin.
That's what that picture is on the left.
The picture on the left is a picture of
It's
carbon
a representation.
atoms.
It's really not carbon. This is, but
This is a representation of carbon
let me
atoms
pull it up a little bit
in a
more.
sheet, and
So we got a sheet here.
that sheet is 1 atom thick,
Yep.
and there it is. And this is something that was only developed recently, and graphene
Very
comes in-
recently, within the last, certainly the last 10 years. And they're starting now to get practical results from their
isn't
lab
graphene
stuff.
what they're using for the carbon for building frames of aircraft and stuff like that now? Or is that a
Well, they're
different
actually using it for baseball bats. So it's gotten down that far. Golf clubs,
Wow.
baseball bats,
But there are forms of
remarkably
graphene that
strong.
are being discovered every day.
and it conducts heat and electricity with great efficiency.
Right.
And because it's so thin, it's virtually two-dimensional, like a sheet of paper.
Yes.
Basically two-dimensional.
Except thinner than a sheet of paper.
Oh, much, much
I wonder
thinner
if you
than
can get a
paper.
graphene cut like you can get a paper cut.
It interacts oddly with light and other materials, this thing says. And in graphene, the carbon atoms are densely packed in a regular atomic scale chicken wire pattern. That's what we're seeing on the left. It can be described as a 1 atom thick layer of graphite. So it's very closely related to graphite.
Yep.
And then it can be formed into nanostructures, such as nanotubes. That's what we got in the middle. They just rotated this thing into a tube
And closed it.
and closed it. And fullerenes, which are also called buckyballs, and that's that spherical thing there.
Yeah.
And I was wondering why they called them buckyballs. And it has to do with Buckminster Fuller.
Yeah.
Not that he invented any of this stuff, but he invented the geodesic dome, which is what these things remind you of.
People of, yeah.
I'm looking at the right. That looks like a soccer ball to me.
It sure looks like a soccer ball.
But anyhow, the superconductive properties of graphene make it possible, and this is a separate thing. This came up last week. The Navy's doing it.
Yes.
Make it possible to generate electricity simply by running salt water over it.
Oh my gosh.
The moving water loses and then reabsorbs electrons as it passes across the graphene, thus creating a current.
Oh my gosh.
So graphene can also be used as an insulator in a form known as an aerogel. And an aerogel is a simply liquid with a liquid gel with the liquid removed and replaced by air. I have no idea what that means. I have no idea how they could do that. But here's the takeaway.
Yeah.
Such technology is a small miracle, yet is only one example of dozens of advances occurring as renewable energy technology comes into contact with new materials and starts to be transformed by
Right. That's right.
I've said it in a different way. There's a lot of very bright people all around the world working on
there
stuff
sure
like
are,
this,
yeah.
and some of them are going to hit it, and some of them are going to hit it big.
That's right. The properties of graphene are absolutely outrageous. For example, it comes in a couple of different forms, one of which has been around for a while. The other one I think is fairly new. But this newer form is extremely conductive of heat.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, copper is so conductive of heat that if you make a little copper coil and you have a wire coming off of it, so you can do this, and you just put that coil over the flame of a candle.
A candle, yeah.
It'll snuff out the candle by withdrawing the heat.
Withdrawing the heat from the candle.
It allows the oxygen to go in. It just doesn't,
Yeah.
And this stuff is extremely conductive. Graphene is 6 times as conductive
That's copper.
as copper. And it's more conductive than, this is one of the reasons why people call diamonds ice is not the appearance, it's because they feel cold.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they feel cold is they conduct heat by like mad.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they are nowhere near as conductive as this stuff. And I think there are a lot of implications. When we can get into the manufacture of this sheet-type graphene easily, we're going to wind up having, I think, some just amazing changes that come about.
Well, again, something that you picked up last week was again about graphene.
Yeah.
And they're talking about making supercapacitors out of it.
Yes, that's right.
Now, a capacitor or condenser is an electronic device.
Yep.
And it's basically 2 sheets of conductive material. Think of it as like cookie sheets, separated by a sheet of non-conductive material. Think
Which
of it
could
as
be it could be air.
it could be air,
But
but
it
air
could
is
also-
likely to break down. It's more likely to be plastic or
Yeah.
wax paper.
Saran wrap.
I mean, you could make a simple capacitor at home with a couple of cookie sheets and a piece of wax paper,
Yes.
and it could actually be used in electronics.
Yes.
What they've done in the real electronics is taken the analog. It's not cookie sheets, a very thin form of maybe aluminum. They made a little sandwich and rolled it up like a jelly roll, and had a conductor on the middle, had a conductor on the outside, and this little tube. It's a capacitor.
Yeah.
They're now doing this stuff with graphene.
Yep.
And the only difference is they're much, much smaller.
Yes.
And they can have the potential of storing enormous amounts of power.
By using lots and lots of them.
Well, it is lots and lots of them, but the lots and lots of them isn't very big physically.
Yeah.
I think I said it here when I was in college. A farad is the unit they use to measure capacitance.
Yep.
Now, a farad, a capacitor of a farad when I was in college was about the size of this room. When we talked about microfarads and microfarads, they were the things that were in radios.
Yeah.
Now I visualize them using something like this technology in the next 10 years or so as the power in cars.
Yes.
Now, one of the differences between these and a storage battery is the batteries operate chemically.
Yes, and these things don't.
These things don't.
No moving parts, no chemicals.
So you can charge them instantly, or almost instantly. You could probably charge a fat supercapacitor made with this technology as quickly as you can pour gas in a car.
Yeah. We've got to say goodbye to people.
7 seconds left.
Goodbye,
Goodbye,
everyone.
people.
We will stick around for those who are on the internet, but goodbye to everyone else who's watching by broadcast.
So I guess what I'm saying is I'm looking at this as a breakthrough that
It's a huge.
that's about to happen.
Huge breakthrough.
And when it happens, the electric car is here.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think the electric car is here already. But with this, we could wind up having electric cars that could go very long distances.
Well, that's it. The drawback of the electric car right now is 2 things. It takes too long to charge them.
Yeah.
And you can't carry enough batteries to go very far.
Mm-hmm.
But that situation is going to be over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of when. I'm saying inside of 10 years.
Yeah, I think I've read that analysts are saying the electric car is going to dominate the market by 2020, and I think once
2020.
Yeah,
That's less than 10 years.
that is less than 10 years.
Well, it's going to take a big big change in storage technology
Well,
in those 10 years.
Elon Musk is building the
Yeah, he's
gigafactory.
building a huge capacitor. I mean, a huge battery plant.
factory, and that's probably going to start with lithium batteries. But you know that he's going to be researching everything that could replace lithium batteries.
Oh yeah.
I don't know the man, but I have a suspicion that he's not stupid.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I wouldn't bet against that.
yeah, the analysts that I've been reading have been saying that they think that the battery-powered car will dominate the market, and this is battery or battery plus some kind of generator, onboard generator.
Mm-hmm.
So Chevy Volt would be part of that. Plug-in Prius would be part
Right
of it.
now, that makes sense, but eventually that isn't going to be necessary.
I don't think it is either. And
The infrastructure is going to be everywhere.
Yeah, and when you have, like with these capacitors, the ability to charge a battery virtually instantly, or charge a capacitor virtually instantly, and also, you know, these capacitors that are made of graphene. Graphene is extremely expensive.
Now,
yeah, it's like graphene today is like solar panels were in 1980. You know, it's very high price. But you know what's happened to the price of solar panels? They're about 0.1% or less of what they were in 1980. And so, as the price of this, as these things, this kind of graphene is really something that, as I understand it, only appears in a laboratory. If you want graphene, the easiest way to get it is to make it yourself.
at this stage of the game.
Yeah, and by the time we're done, when people know how to make this stuff in large quantities and turn it out like sheets of paper, it's going to get turned out like sheets of paper, and it's going to have a cost like sheets of paper.
Exactly.
And so you're going to have a car that's powered by a power plant, depending on a bunch of sheets of paper that have been
rolled into a jelly roll.
That's right.
And I'm picturing a battery that's about the size of a broomstick.
Really?
And the whole floor of the car would be made of these little broomsticks.
Yeah.
And it's going to be able to store enough. I can visualize this. Store enough energy to go 500-600 miles.
I can absolutely see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the one thing that's dangerous about it is you don't want to touch the leads.
Well, yeah. Yeah, it is capable of discharging instantly.
Instantly. So if you were to touch a turkey with one of these things, you'd have a burnt Thanksgiving dinner a second later.
I didn't think of it that way, but yes,
it would be.
That is the downside.
Well, I don't know.
But they could protect against that.
They can protect against that. And the other thing, too, is these things can be put into houses. If they're that inexpensive, and I think that we are going to be looking at batteries that are that inexpensive.
Yeah,
I have no doubt of it. We're going to have these things in people's houses, and if there's a power outage, a lot of people won't notice. And it won't be something that costs a lot of money.
Absolutely right.
This is a product that would be good for the people in the house. It would be good for the people who supply them with power.
Absolutely.
Because it means that the power is as a matter of fact, I had a computer once, and I was working on it because I was a software engineer, and I took the top off this PC, and while I was working on it, it exploded.
I hate it when that happens.
Huh? It went pop. It was a very loud pop. It was a lot louder than a pop of a cap gun or something. But I looked at it, and I could see that a capacitor on the motherboard had exploded.
Wow.
And so I called in one of the hardware engineers because I had no idea what to do about this. And he looked at it for a second. Oh yeah, I can fix that. And I said, do you have a capacitor to replace it? He said, no, I don't need it. And he just took a pair of wire cutters and tiny wire cutters and cut the thing off, and he said, now you're good to go. And I said, what is this all about? And he said, that capacitor is just to level the load. That's all it does.
Okay.
And in that position, it's really not necessary. It's nicer, but it's not in a place where it's going to do any damage if the load is not leveled.
Yeah.
He said it might have some almost unnoticeable degradation in the quality of the video or something. Okay, the point that I'm making, is that thing was there to level the load because AC wasn't good enough. You see, or the rectified AC was not good enough, or whatever it was that was there was not of high enough quality, and they wanted to have that be constant. Now, if you think about solar and wind, and the inconsistencies of solar and wind, and that constant capacity, it would make perfect sense for the utility to say to somebody, we need to have batteries. We need to have a way of storage that power. Oh, and by the way, if you will buy the batteries and put them in your house, you'll have backup power.
Or we'll supply the batteries for you, and you'll pay an extra $1 or $2 a month, and the lights aren't going to go out.
Whatever it is that it takes.
Whatever the business model is that makes the most sense is going to happen.
It's going to happen. And it puts you in a position where if you've got solar or wind,
you're ahead of the game.
You're ahead of the game because you've got free power in terms of the fuel, and you've got a power source which is as reliable 24/7 as anything else.
As anything.
So, you know, and when you've got batteries that are made of paper, I mean, really, this graphene is very likely to be made literally of paper.
Which at least made in a process similar to paper making.
The graphene that I've read about, and of course I'm not an expert on it, but the graphene that I've read about is all taking carbon-based things in one form or another.
Like coal.
Like coal. Well, you know, it could be anything really.
Yeah, it could.
And then decomposing it.
Yeah.
And I've been seeing this happen since I was in high school. As a matter of fact, I remember an article in the Wall Street Journal, and I think it was 1964, might have been 1965. Somebody was talking about a company building really high pressure equipment so that they could produce, I forget what it was, 150,000 atmospheres of pressure. That's a lot of pressure.
That's a lot of pressure.
And they were demonstrating this. And the way they demonstrated it was by putting a dab of peanut butter onto a thing that went into this, and then putting it under pressure, and of course there were reporters around and so forth. And when the pressure was released, and they took the thing out that they had the peanut butter on,
they had a diamond.
They had a diamond. They had a diamond. Now, of course, it was not exactly a high-grade diamond, but they had, in fact, my guess is it was probably diamond dust. But they had diamond there. And they had made diamond out of peanut butter. Okay, so what would happen if you made graphene out of peanut butter? Well, I don't know, but the way that they have
probably
made,
raise the cost of peanut butter.
It might. The way they've made graphene that I've read about, they started with cotton.
Okay.
And they made cotton threads, and the cotton threads were subjected to high temperatures, and in a proper environment. And when they came out, when these threads came out, what they had was threads that were made of carbon, pure carbon. And that carbon was a form of graphene. And now this is the sheets. And you're not going to get that by decomposing paper. But you are likely to get something that would be as a really good capacitor by taking paper, ordinary paper, and converting it to carbon, just like you said, and making that jelly roll out of it.
Just last week there was something about, I think it's University of Washington or Oregon, something doing exactly that.
Yeah.
Doing it in the lab. And the particular paper they mentioned was filter paper, coffee filter paper.
Okay, coffee filter paper.
Yeah.
All right. And what you do with this is you turn it into the carbon, and then you put, I don't know, I suppose you could paint it with shellac if you felt like it, and then roll it up and have that.
Exactly.
Have that shellac be
exactly.
the thing that is the insulator. And so
or a thin film of
saran wrap.
Non-conductive.
Saran wrap.
Non-conductive graphene.
Oh, okay.
That can be made non-conductive too.
Oh my gosh.
You can make the whole thing out of graphene.
Well,
and you could run the whole thing in a kind of a paper making process, very similar to how they make 2-ply toilet paper.
Yes.
Make it 3-ply, roll it all up. Now you got your capacitor.
Yeah, you've got a capacitor that you could alternately use as toilet paper, if you had to.
If you really had to, yeah, it'd be kind of harsh though.
I suppose, but. The point is that we're not talking about mining gadolinium here, or you know, going out and prospecting for the local supply of rubidium, or it's not even lithium.
This is going to be some pretty down-to-earth stuff.
This is pretty down-to-earth stuff.
In another 10, 20 years.
And you know, it's very much like the silicon that we're using for chips. Mm-hmm. This is 99.99 whatever, however many nines there are, pure silicon. Well, what is silicon?
Sand.
Yeah, it's you know, and why is it expensive? Because it's extremely pure. It's not easy to purify.
That's what makes it expensive.
Well, the same thing is going to get true of this. And what happens with the silicon is, as it becomes less and less expensive to make it, the price of silicon goes down and down. And the thing that makes it less and less expensive is that the technology behind keeping the place pure, dust-free, and so forth, where it is made, that's an important issue. And issues like that, which are just nitty-gritty issues that people have to face, do some standard engineering on, they don't need to know. The people who are driving the decrease in the price of silicon are not silicon people. They are ordinary engineers and other scientists of various backgrounds who are figuring out how to make a better dust filter so that you can get the ventilation system not to have dust in it. This is very important stuff, but it's very down to earth at the same time. And when you're dealing with paper, like you said, you know, you're talking about toilet paper, you're talking about coffee filter paper, and we're not talking about lithium, and we're not talking about lead either. Because, you know, lead has got its issues. It's cheaper than lithium, but it's, you know, it's got its issues. And as that happens, I think, you know, I think that we're going to see an energy revolution that even a lot of people in the energy workplace don't anticipate.
Well, things are changing. The old model that worked so well for the last century is over.
Yeah.
As we know it, it's definitely over.
Yeah.
And the new model is going to evolve, really.
Yeah.
It's not going to be thrust upon us. It's going to grow. It's going to evolve. And in 100 years, it's going to look very, very, very different from
very different. And I
today.
think there are very few people who would be able to anticipate. In fact, I don't know if anybody would really be able to anticipate all of what that's going to look like.
I don't think so. I mean, there's a lot of people can guess, but there's a lot of variables, some of which haven't even appeared yet.
Yeah, well, you know, Jules Verne, I'm told, foresaw the advent of television.
Okay.
But he believed it would happen in 2,000 years.
How about that? How about that?
It's hard to anticipate some of these things. But I do think that we're going to see a change in we're going to see a change in everything.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of it, maybe most of the overwhelming majority of it is going to be a positive change. We can hope.
I'm optimistic that is going to happen, and it's going to happen through just normal processes. It's not going to come from the top down. It's going to come from the bottom up. Somebody's going to come up with a better way of doing something. Somebody else is going to come up with a better way of doing that. And eventually they're all going to be adopted.
You know, if you're thinking about that, if you look at the history of the computer, computers were big and scary. You know, when I was a kid, computers were big and scary, and we were anticipating the idea that big government would own them and they would keep track of us. And maybe they do. I don't know. But
maybe.
But I mean the way that they were anticipating in those days, it was like there were people, I suppose there still are people who believed that the government was going to know where you are 100% of the time.
Well, right now they do. I have a cell phone in my pocket. They know where that is.
My cell phone.
And it's shut off. The only way they don't know is if you take the battery out.
Well, my cell phone, they don't know. They don't know where.
They know where it is.
No, they don't know where it is.
Oh, okay.
If it's off, it doesn't have GPS.
Okay. They don't know where it is.
They don't know where it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, my cell phone is too cheap and just simple for that. But
they probably don't know it's yours.
They probably don't care. But
yeah, that's also true.
the thing that made the computer revolution, as we think of the computer revolution, was the introduction and rise of the PCs.
Yeah.
And by which I mean not the IBM PC, but
I mean, there was functioning computers in the 1890s, but they were mechanical.
Yes, and I've seen.
And they worked.
I've seen some of them, and they were pretty bizarre. But I used to work for a company that still had one.
Did you?
Yeah, I was sitting on I can remember, somebody saying, "This is how it works." If you wanted to add 11 and 2, you'd turn a crank once and move the thing over, and you'd turn it once. That was the 11. Then you'd move it back again, and you'd turn it twice. And that was the 2. Yeah. If you wanted to add up 998 with 98,987, you had a lot of cranking to do.
Sore arm, yeah.
Yeah, but the personal computer, as we know it, the first microcomputer that came on the market was the MITS Altair.
I remember that, yeah.
And the MITS Altair was a machine that was developed by a guy who needed to put together a way to get out of debt.
I guess he did it.
Yeah, he did it. And then he sold the company and retired, and the people who bought the company went broke. And then you have the next group come in, which were the ones that had CPM, and they had similar results. And then you had Apple come in, and with its Model 1 and much more famous Model 2, which were based on 6509 processor.
I have no idea.
It was, I think they had a Motorola processor, and I just don't remember what the designation was. But they had a PC. They had a little computer that people could use in their home. And I had, at that time, one that came out from Radio Shack, which was
TRS-80.
TRS-80, yeah. And Radio Shack, when that came out, was not much bigger than a Mon Power organization. The same thing was true of Commodore.
Yeah.
And of course, Apple was 2 guys in a garage. Yeah. And Microsoft was 2 guys in a garage. And that's what was driving this revolution.
Yeah.
Was the repetition of 2 guys in a garage and a couple of small businesses. And it was IBM getting involved that drove the market to I think beyond the point of being people in a garage and into the business of being a force in the marketplace, in the workplace, which then of course they couldn't control. But the energy market, I think, is going to go exactly the same way. It's being developed by small organizations. I saw stuff today, vertical wind generators. These were interesting little turbines that were being mounted on the rooftops of hotels.
Okay.
All right. I mean, this is low noise.
Yeah, yeah.
And the things were turning in such a way that it's difficult to imagine a bird flying into one of these things. They make almost no noise, and they. What have you got there?
I was just thinking I wanted to run a couple other pictures out of here before we run out of time.
Look at pictures.
This is run-of-the-river hydro.
Oh, good.
Okay, so let me figure out which mouse I'm playing with. Right
there
now.
You go. You've got it.
There we go. This is in BC.
Okay.
And that's a real picture. That's really happening. That's a run-of-the-river hydro station operated by BC Hydro.
Okay.
And what makes it different is that's not really a dam. I mean, it is, but it's not damming the complete river and flooding a valley.
Yeah.
It's just impounding a little bit of that water,
yep.
And they're diverting a little bit of that water off there on the right. And here's a generating station right there in the lower right corner.
Yep.
And they feed the water right back into the river. This whole thing's not more than a quarter mile long.
If you look at that thing, the part that looks like a dam, just a little ways in from the left edge is a thing that looks to me like it might be a fish ladder.
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be, because they would need some sort of a fish ladder here. The fish aren't going to go through.
There's a fish ladder that looks similar to that up at Bellows Falls.
Is there?
Yeah. It's really an interesting thing. They have They have a little kind of museum-like structure at the dam in Bellows
I've heard
Falls.
about that. Haven't seen
And
it.
you can go in there and you can look into the fish ladder
And you can see it, yeah.
the fish going by. I went in there one day.
I think they got a fish ladder down in Vernon that you can do that too.
I would hope they
Yeah,
would, yeah.
yeah.
Mark Crowther was up there giving a, is that his name? Mark,
Yeah,
Mark
yeah,
Crowther.
yeah.
Did you ever hear from him? I should give him a call and see if he
Well, I
would
heard
like-
from him. He agreed in principle, but
Okay.
we got to set it up.
We have to set it
Yeah.
up, okay. And that, you see, that's another thing that I got my certification for the camera.
Okay, good.
So, you know, you and I, or one of us, could go out to wherever he's got his stuff
And take some pictures.
and take some pictures.
Yeah.
I'm going to do something at home. By the way, did I mention to you the thing about the bell siphon?
The what?
In aquaponics, they have a thing called a bell siphon. Let's finish with this, and then I'll talk about the bell siphon for a second.
Okay, well, we'll just finish up on here. This is this particular run of the river. This
Yep.
other one down here is another one. This one's in Wales.
Yes.
Matter of fact, I got one there for you. I'll try and pinpoint it there. You have to pronounce those words.
Where are they?
It's, well, right about there.
I don't see where your cursor.
Well, it's HAFOD
Havod.
YLLAN.
Oh, I see. Havod, hlan, Havod hlan.
Say that again.
Havod hlan.
So the Y is an
The Y is actually no. It would be Havod ihlan. Havod ihlan. It's like an I.
The two L's is pronounced as an L?
No, it's pronounced. It's the only Indo-European language that has that sound,
Oh, okay.
and it is. Celtic languages are all strange, and they
I
have
know that, yeah.
letters that change, which is why you have
Yeah,
all these
yeah.
things. You put an H after a letter, and it's completely altered.
Oh, absolutely.
You know? Welsh does the same thing. It just does it slightly differently than Irish. Yeah, but it's Havod hlan, and the hlan means it's like a. Hlan it's an enclosed area around a church, and it's an area around a church, I should say. I think the closest you might come to it in English is parish, but yeah.
Well, the story here is there's a Wales National Trust who's got the job of looking after the castles and
Yes.
the art.
Yes.
And they're using this particular dam. It's really a weir.
Yeah.
And a few others, and they're producing more electricity than they need.
Yeah. A weir, by the way, for anybody who's interested, you can see that dam looks like it's on an angle. And the water is flowing down on there fairly fast. But believe it or not, a fish can swim up that water.
Up that, yeah. Yeah.
So that's the thing that makes it a weir rather than a dam, is that it's an obstruction in a river, but it's not. It doesn't block things completely.
Well, you can see the water's flowing over the top of it.
Yeah.
So it's impounding a little bit of water, which is coming off on the left there. There's probably a turbine just behind that little pipe.
Yep. Get enough water going through that, and you can have quite a lot of electricity.
It's lighting up all of the National Trust places in Wales, including 8 mansions, 3 castles, and 45 holiday cottages. Yeah, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Looks like a pretty spot, too.
Yep.
Well, that was what I had about Running River Hydro.
Okay.
And kind of a sequel to what we had yesterday
Yeah.
or last week.
Yeah. The thing that I was going to say about the bell siphon is that in aquaponics, you have a fish tank, and the fish, of course, like all animals, produce waste. But the waste is floating around in the water. Mm-hmm. And then what you do is you pump the water, which means that you're pumping some of that waste, into a grow bed where you've got, and this is like hydroponics, where you've got just water running over the roots of the plants. And the way the grow beds work, one of the ways to do it is what's called an ebb and flow system, where you pump it until the grow bed is full of water, and then it flushes the water.
Then you let
out.
it, yeah.
And that keeps the roots both wet and oxygenated. And you can grow many, many plants in that kind of situation, far more than you would imagine. And the way that you control that ebb and flow can be what's called a bell siphon, which is a siphon system that has no moving parts. And the water goes up until it hits the top of a standpipe, and then it starts down the standpipe, And,
Okay.
and then it forms enough column of water going down that it will rush. Now that whole system is covered by a pipe with a much larger pipe with a cap on it, so with holes in the bottom. So the water will rush in through the holes in the bottom and it'll go up the pipe, but there's no way for air to get in there. So the thing sets up a siphon. And,
Okay.
and there has to be some way to break the siphon when the thing gets to the bottom. Otherwise, bubbles come in and they just kind of go down with the water that's going down, and so it never really breaks the siphon. So what they do is they have a tube that comes down to the point where you want to break the siphon. When it reaches that, the tube sucks air up, and that theoretically breaks the siphon. But when it does that, the water in the siphon suddenly drops, which raises the water around where that tube is, which means that now it's sucking water again, and that water will cause the siphon to restart. So you get this kind of chaotic situation that can lead to a stable situation where the thing is slowly siphoning and it's not doing its job. So I thought about this for a little while, and I decided the thing to do was to bring the tube down and then to loop it back up again, so that as the water level drops, first it hits the end of the tube, and the water level just drops in the tube like it drops in the rest of the system, until you get to the bottom of the loop. And when that happens, the water in the tube gets sucked up, but the end of the tube is not underwater or even near the water level. So the siphon just stops flat. And we've been experimenting with that for the last few days. It works really nicely. So
this thing cycles.
It cycles.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have a pump that's always pumping.
Yeah.
The only moving part in the system is the pump. So I've got a I think it's a 7.5 watt pump or something like that is pumping.
Like a fish tank pump or something.
Yeah. It's a very small pump that pumps, I don't know, it might be, I'm going to say I'm going to guess that it pumps about 4 gallons a minute. It's not very much, but it pumps it in, and it's pumping into a grow bed that's full of shale, and when that thing has about 30 gallons in it, it dumps the whole thing. So the cycle goes for over a period of about 12 minutes. So the roots get wet. The roots, the roots are underwater. They're in the air. They're underwater. They're in the air. They never dry out. They
never get soaked.
They never drown.
Or,
yeah, exactly. Interesting picture you got there.
Yeah, let me pull this one up.
But that bell siphon is something that I want to
I saved a picture. The picture is about a program where British Airways is going to power their jets with fuel made out of garbage waste. And this was just in the picture. But I looked at it and said, what's going on here? It looks like the plane's sitting on top of the other one.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's landing.
On the other side of the other one.
That was a wreck.
That was a wreck.
And that was a wreck that happened in July in San Francisco in 2013.
Wow.
So it's still, well, I don't know when this picture was taken, but that was a wreck. Let's see, I got another picture here too. This is Fukushima again.
Oh dear, Fukushima.
And I really can't quite figure what's going on there, but that's water. And it looks like it's in maybe leather sacks or something like that, but
they're getting desperate.
They're hauling subsurface water from the reactor buildings using that technology, whatever the heck it is. Let's see if I got another one here. This is an interesting one. This is in Spain, and it's a prototype, and it's old. This is 20 years old, 1980s.
Really? Okay.
A test solar updraft tower. And it ran for several years before it toppled in a windstorm.
Oh my gosh.
And what you see in there is a bunch of mirrors, and they're focusing this on a tower, and the air goes up in the tower, and they use that moving air to drive a turbine. And just to see, it's not exactly the same thing as what is out in California in Ivanpah. Similar, bunch of mirrors, but they're producing heat up in that brightly lit part of the tower, and it's got sodium or sodium chloride or something in there.
I think it's liquid salt. It's
that's sodium chloride,
really
yeah.
hot
it
salt.
melts,
yeah.
and that they use to run the turbine.
Yeah, which will go in the night because you can store.
Yeah, that's the
store
secret
heat.
about this. It stores the energy during the day when the sun is shining,
Yeah.
and they can run it all or most of the
Yeah.
night. Let's see if I got a new. This one's also interesting. This couple has invented a paving material that's a solar cell.
Right.
That's their particular patio, and they're experimenting with it. But they say it can be used in a highway.
Yes.
I'd think it would be slippery, but I don't know.
That patio, I think, is actually not a patio. I think it's their driveway.
Well, you can see it's right next to their building, so it could be a driveway. Yeah.
Yeah, but they were talking about using this.
It's designed to be driven on.
Yeah, they were talking about using it as a.
So you can see them holding the basic building blocks. That's
Yep.
not the solar panel. That's what's protecting it, and it looks
Yep.
like it's got a roughened surface, so you can so you get some traction on it.
Yep.
And the picture on the right is snow, and they're saying it'll melt its own snow.
Yep. That's interesting because, of course, that means that it would be unnecessary to plow it.
Yeah. If the snow doesn't come down fast enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saved this picture because I think it's kind of neat.
Yeah.
It's a wind farm in Utah,
Yeah.
and it's a pretty little valley. I don't think that the turbines really detract from the view. I don't know. That's a
I
matter
think
of
the
opinion.
turbines actually probably add to it. I suspect that would be kind of a dull view without them. Just imagine that without them. I mean, it would be nice countryside and so forth, but without.
That's interesting, but
Yeah.
I mean, I look at that, and I'm not in any way offended.
Well, I told you about the tourism polls they had in Cornwall, where they found that for every person who objected to the wind turbines, there were three or four who found them attractive.
Yeah.
So they were a plus from the point of view, not a strong plus, but they were a plus.
Now, this graph is based upon what actually happened. This isn't a projection. Top sources of new U.S. power capacity during the first quarter of 2013.
Yep.
And it's solar by far. Wind is very close second. Natural gas, distant third.
Solar in this is almost 50% of the total.
Mm-hmm.
And
This is
that's-
unfortunately just the new stuff.
Yeah, I know, but this is what they
it's
were
moving
talking
in the right
about
direction.
when we had that article that we talked about last week, where the guy was saying it's only 1% of the capacity.
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
it's
halfway
getting halfway to
there.
dominance.
Yep.
And that's what they mean is that dominance. In that graph, it's dominating. It's more. It's
Yeah,
about 50%. So
absolutely,
it's
there
getting
already.
there. Yeah.
Now what we're seeing here, this is an actual microgrid in Japan.
Yes.
It's all self-contained.
Yes.
I would imagine that these two buildings here are storage. And I would imagine that these two things underneath it are some sort of generators, maybe natural gas or something like that.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of solar along what I'm sure is a
Yep.
south or west facing wall.
Yep.
And other stuff in there I don't know. But
Yep.
this whole grid is self-contained.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's feeding that building in the back. I don't know much about it, but it just shows that what can be done. And the takeaway from this thing, as I got it highlighted, the grid should be treated as a public good like buses or subways.
Yeah.
We as a society think that these are important assets, even if we don't all use them. Its cost should not be borne entirely by those who remain dependent on it.
Yes.
It's a public good.
It's a public good.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
that's what they're saying there.
Yeah.
Oh, this has to do with the climate.
Yeah, and it has to do with why climate change, which is also known as global warming, made the northeast of the United States
Why we were so cold and Florida and California was so hot and dry.
Yep.
I
And
don't
they're
want to go
saying
into the
that
details.
they're saying that they think that is something that might just keep going.
And there's Mr. Coke.
Well,
And there's that.
that
We've
chat.
seen. I guess we've seen all of these guys now.
Yeah, we
I
haven't
don't want to
seen
get
that.
involved in the graphs here.
Yeah,
I
they
think
were
we've seen everything on here
fill
now.
time, the hospital.
Oh, this is interesting. This is in Nottingham. You remember Nottingham,
I've
Robin
been there.
Hood, huh?
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
This is a recycling facility.
Isn't that nice?
It's pretty clean.
Yep.
And this is, the company that's behind this is called Chinook, and their unique process recovers valuable materials, including all of the discarded waste metals, and generates significantly more than 1 megawatt of clean, green energy from a typical ton of residual household or commercial waste.
Yep.
They're getting close to that Chicago stockyard thing where they capture everything but the squeal.
Yes.
They're getting there.
Yes.
And this is a picture of the Athabasca River flowing north, and that's where the tar sands are.
Yep. And those rivers that flow north can be problems because
That's what's happening. They're getting polluted, and
Well,
there's a lot of disease popping up
yes.
among the native people down there.
Well, yeah.
And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get the oil companies to pay for solar panels
In Canada.
in that area of Canada. Yep.
Yeah. Which is very far north. They want solar panels. I can't blame
Yeah.
them for that.
Well, it's interesting. They don't get a lot of sun all year round, but in the summertime they get a lot of sun all day.
Yes.
On Thursday, that's this last Thursday, I guess, the subarctic Canadian settlement sun rose at 5:50 a.m., shining until it set at around 9 o'clock at night. So that's a long day.
And we're not even to summer yet.
And we're not even in the summer yet.
Yep.
We've seen this guy, we've seen these guys. This fascinates me. This really does.
It fascinates a lot of people, I'm sure.
And this is about power balancing. This is about the fact that the demand changes all day long, and the power has been constant. And
Which
now,
that thing of the capacitors, the jelly roll capacitors,
yeah,
is going to be a big help.
that's
in that.
going to resolve this problem. Things
think
like
so,
that are
yeah.
going to resolve this problem. This we saw. I think that's the end of my pictures. Yeah,
Well,
that's the
thanks
end
for
of them.
doing that, Tom. And I think it's probably time to say goodbye to everybody.
It probably is. I've run out of pictures. We got nothing else.
We just don't have anything more to say.
I'm not up on the sports, so. Hey, you look good with your hat on.
Yeah, nice. I'm very proud of myself.
Yeah.
I'm being careful.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good night, or whatever it is
Whatever
when
it
you're
is.
seeing this.
Absolutely.
And we'll see you next week.
I sure hope so.